Hello, this is Greg Herman with Herman Law Firm. Um, I want to talk a little bit today about just a standard Texas insurance policy. Lots of people say I have full coverage, and what they usually mean by that is they have liability coverage for if they injure somebody else or cause property damage, and they usually mean they have comprehensive coverage and collision coverage. So if they run into something, they'll be covered. That's not really full coverage. First of all, let's just talk about liability. If you just get the standard policy in Texas, it's usually a 30, 60, 25 policy. That means 30,000 liability per person, 60,000 per accident. So if there's more than one person that you injure, then there's $60,000 to go towards their injuries. And then 25. And I tell people all the time that 25 means property damage to other vehicles or other property. That's really not a lot of money, especially if you run into a brand new car. You know, most cars today cost more than $25,000. And if you run into a brand new car, $25,000 isn't going to cut it. Especially if it's $100,000 car, let's say it's $100,000 Mercedes. Even if it's a couple years old, it's still going to be worth probably 75,000 or 60,000, at least. So 25 isn't really that much. So I encourage everybody to raise all their limits. It doesn't cost that much more money to raise them. But full coverage to me means you also have PIP, personal injury protection. And that means it'll pay you and anybody else in your vehicle, no matter whose fault it is. It'll pay your lost wages and your medical bills, no matter who's at fault. And then uninsured motorist coverage. And the reason this is so important is because there's so many people running around out there without any insurance at all. And they run into you and you get, their information, and you call their insurance company and you find out, hey, they didn't make their payment. They didn't make their insurance payment. Their policy's lapsed. So now here you are, you're stuck, you're injured, you've got medical bills, you've got pain and suffering, you may have disfigurement, you may have loss of capacity, loss of physical capacity, lost wages, loss of earning capacity. You could have really severe injuries, and there's no money to cover you. So if you get your own insurance policy, it just makes sense. Don't rely on the other person to cover your bills, because they're probably going to have the minimum policy to begin with, if they have any at all. So, just assume the average person out there doesn't have insurance. Just like right now, we're doing this during a pandemic. I just assume everybody I run into's probably got the virus. So, I just take the precautions. That's why I'm wearing I've got it right here, wearing my mask. But I just assume everybody I see's probably got the virus. They may be asymptomatic, but they probably have it. So I think if you just go on the assumption that most people out there don't have insurance, then you can take the appropriate course of action and get coverage yourself, so that you're protected in case you get injured by somebody else's negligence. And it happens all the time. We see it every single day. We get all kinds of people that come in and hire us, and turns out the adverse person doesn't have any coverage. Anyway, that's what full coverage would be. And there's some other things you can add, like rental coverage, gap coverage, towing and labor, things like that, to really, really, really get full coverage. But if your agent says you have full coverage, doesn't necessarily mean that's full coverage. So, and also in Texas, they have to specifically ask you, do you want PIP and do you want and you have to specifically reject it, and have to do it in writing. And so you have to check a box or sign something saying that you do not want those coverages. Otherwise, you're going to get them. So most agents are pretty good about getting you to sign that piece of paper, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes they forget, which means you're going to have it. But don't rely on your agent forgetting to check the box. You need to make sure you want those coverages. So that's basically it. The 30, 60, 25, you probably ought to up those, and everybody ought to get and everybody ought to get PIP. And that's it for today.